The room at the end of the third-floor corridor never looks empty. Even when the door is open and the landlord swears it is. A single tube light hums like a trapped insect. The window stares into an alley where neon dies and steam drifts up from noodle pots below. The tiles are the color of old teeth. The desk is pressed against the wall. The chair tucked in just so, as if someone meant to return after a cigarette break and never did. At midnight, the building changes key. Pipes stop their knocking. The neighbors' televisions fade to a ribbon of blue. That's when you hear it, the dry shuffle of a chair foot. The staccato peck of a typewriter with a ribbon long past ink. A throat clearing before a sentence begins. The landlord says the last tenant left years ago and forgot to take his ghost. He was punctual, they say, a copywriter who paid rent on the first. Bought the same menthols from the corner stand. Worked late with the door locked. Now the door is never truly closed. If you pass after lights out, the handle is warm, the keyhole breathing. Sometimes a page lies in the ribbonless machine, perfectly blank but embossed with pressure marks, letters pressed into silence from the other side. Her name was Alice Ng, a 24-year-old student fresh out of university, clutching her first job in Mong Kok. Rent in Hong Kong was merciless, and her modest paycheck barely covered basics. When she saw the notice for a cheap room in Sham Shui Po, a whole space to herself. Not just a partitioned cubicle, she thought she had stumbled on a miracle. The building was nothing special. 5 floors of aging concrete, narrow stairwells steeped in cooking oil and mildew. The landlady was brisk but kind, pressing a set of keys into Alice's hand with a warning not to leave rubbish in the hall. Room 306 waited at the end of the corridor, its paint peeling, but the window overlooked the alley and the desk was solid wood. Alice pictured herself studying late, writing reports, finally living alone without parents or flatmates. She settled in quickly, stacking books on the desk, hanging clothes in the small wardrobe. Nights were quiet, except for the neon hum outside and the occasional cough from neighbors. The first week passed without incident, though she sometimes noticed the chair at her desk pushed back, though she was sure she had tucked it in. Her colleagues teased her about moving into such a rundown block. Haunted, one joked, smirking. Alice rolled her eyes. She didn't believe in that. Still, she caught herself glancing at the desk before bed, making sure the chair was flush, the surface clear. It was on the 10th night that she awoke to a faint sound, soft, deliberate, metallic. She sat up, straining to hear. The noise came again, the staccato rhythm of keys being pressed on a typewriter. But Alice didn't own a typewriter. Alice froze under her blanket, ears straining. The sound was unmistakable, a typewriter. Each keystroke sharp, deliberate, echoing slightly as though the machine sat only a few feet from her bed. She glanced at the desk. The chair was tucked in, the surface empty except for her laptop and a stack of papers. Yet the clicking continued, steady as a metronome. She switched on her lamp. Instantly, the room fell silent, only the hum of the neon outside remained. Alice laughed nervously to herself, muttering that she had dreamt it. She got up, checked the door lock, the window latch, then settled back down. But the next morning, she noticed something strange. On her desk lay a sheet of paper she didn't remember leaving there. It was blank, yet faint impressions marred its surface. She tilted it toward the light and saw letters pressed in without ink. Words struck into silence. "I'm still here." Her stomach turned. She told herself she must have scribbled the marks in her sleep. Still, she folded the paper and slid it into a drawer. Over the following nights, the phenomena grew. Sometimes she woke to the scrape of the chair moving against the floor. Once, at 2 in the morning, she swore she heard someone sigh heavily in the corner of the room. A man's weary exhale after hours of work. When she flicked on the light, the air was empty but smelled faintly of menthol cigarettes. Alice tried to ask the landlady if anything odd had happened in room 306. The woman's smile thinned. "Cheap rent," she said curtly. "Don't ask too many questions." Back in her room, Alice grew more unsettled. She started leaving her phone recording at night. The next day, when she played it back, Her skin prickled. Amid the rustle of bedsheets and her own breathing, another sound intruded, the soft clack of keys being pressed, followed by the scrape of a chair. Then, faintly, a voice murmured a single word, "Deadline." She slammed the phone shut, heart hammering. The room, she realized, wasn't empty when she slept. Someone, something, was still working late at the desk. Alice's nerves began to fray. She told no one at work. Her colleagues already teased her for living in such a rundown block, but her exhaustion showed in the shadows under her eyes. Every night brought some new disturbance. The typewriter clacks grew louder, no longer muffled but crisp, as if the desk sat in an office filled with invisible workers. Sometimes the sound began even before she had fallen asleep, forcing her to bury her head under the pillow. The smell of menthol smoke seeped through the room more often. Hanging in the curtains, in her clothes, she opened the window wide to let the night air clear it. But the next evening it would return, stronger. One night she woke to find her laptop lid flipped open, though she always closed it before bed. On the screen was a blank document, the cursor blinking as if waiting. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, and then, without her touching it, letters began to appear. Slowly, line by line, the words formed. "You're in my seat." Alice recoiled, slamming the laptop shut. The desk chair scraped backward at that exact moment, though she was across the room. The next day she confronted the landlady again, demanding to know what had happened in room 306. The woman only sighed, looking weary. He was a copywriter, she admitted reluctantly. Never missed rent, never missed work. Then one day, he didn't come out. They found him at the desk. Heart stopped, cigarette still burning. "We cleaned the room, but," she trailed off, shaking her head, "some tenants say he's still working." Alice wanted to move out immediately, but her savings were too thin. She told herself she would endure it until her next paycheck. But the room would not wait. That night the typewriter noise gave way to something worse. She woke to find sheets of paper scattered across the floor, all blank except for faint indentations. She gathered them with shaking hands, holding them to the light. On each page, words pressed deep into the fibers. "Meet the deadline." As she stared, a shadow crossed the wall, slight, hunched, as though someone sat at the desk, shoulders bent in concentration. When she turned her head, the chair was empty, but the pressure of unseen eyes on her back was undeniable. Alice realized then that the tenant had never left, and he wasn't simply haunting the room, he was sharing it. Alice couldn't ignore the signs anymore. The room wasn't just haunted, it belonged to someone who still thought he was alive. Determined to understand, she dug through old newspapers in the public library, chasing any mention of sudden deaths in Sham Shui Po. After hours of scrolling microfilm, she found it, a small article from the late 1980s. Copywriter found dead in boarding house. Mr. Lau, 36, collapsed at his desk late at night. Landlady discovered him after neighbors complained of cigarette smoke seeping into the hall. Police suspect heart failure. Authorities urge residents to be mindful of long hours. There was a grainy black and white photo of room 306's window. Neon reflected faintly in the glass. Alice's stomach sank. The description matched perfectly. Back in her room that evening, she whispered the name aloud. "Mr. Lau." The typewriter sound stopped instantly, as though the room itself was holding its breath. Then, slowly, the chair scraped back. A low voice, raspy, tired, filled the air. Finally, "Someone remembers." Alice froze. She could see it now. Faint as mist. A man hunched at the desk, sleeves rolled up, a cigarette smoldering in his hand. His face was gaunt, eyes hollow, but his fingers still hovered over an invisible typewriter. The smell of ink and smoke was overwhelming. "I don't want trouble," Alice stammered. "I just needed a place to stay." The figure leaned back, exhaling smoke that curled into words before fading. "Deadlines don't wait. I can't stop working, not until it's done." Alice's pulse thundered. "But you died. The work ended years ago." The ghost's eyes flicked to hers, dark with something like despair. "Not finished, never finished, until it's complete. I stay." On the desk, fresh sheets of paper appeared. blank but scored with deep imprints, as if hammered by furious typing. Alice picked one up, hands trembling. Across it, one phrase repeated over and over: "Help me finish." The truth chilled her deeper than the haunting itself. The room wasn't cursed by rage or malice, it was chained to obsession. Mr. Lau's life had ended, but his deadline hadn't. Alice realized with a dawning horror, unless she found a way to end the work, she might become his replacement, the next tenant who never leaves. Alice sat at the desk, staring at the pile of blank pages. The air felt thick, heavy with smoke that wasn't there. Her hands trembled as she touched the paper. The indentations were so deep they almost tore through the fibers. Words written without ink, pressed in by fingers that no longer had flesh. Across from her, the outline of Mr. Lau shimmered faintly, shoulders hunched, cigarette glowing dimly, his hollow eyes fixed on her. "Help me finish," he rasped again, his voice layered with static, like a radio tuned between stations. Alice swallowed hard. "What do you want me to write?" The ghost's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. He gestured toward the typewriter that wasn't there, yet suddenly, she heard it. The machine materialized in sound before her eyes, keys clacking rapidly though untouched. A page slid out, blank but filled with impressions. Alice lifted it and read the words faintly embossed: "I was forgotten." Her chest tightened. She realized this wasn't about a project or a client. Mr. Lau's final story had been his own, the endless grind. The deadlines, the life erased in a boarding house no one remembered. His death had been reduced to a short article buried in archives. The typewriter hammered faster, pages spitting into the air, piling on the floor. Each bore the same demand: "Finish, finish, finish." The room shook, the desk rattling violently, the chair jerking as if pulled by unseen hands. Alice shouted over the noise, "It will never be finished. Not like this." The ghost's face contorted, eyes blazing with desperate fury. Smoke filled the room, curling into shapes of words that lashed at her. "Don't stop. Don't stop. Deadline. Deadline." The chair screeched toward her, slamming against her knees. The typewriter keys banged as if struck by invisible fists. Pages burst into flame, curling with ash that drifted toward her face. Heart racing, Alice grabbed one of her own notebooks and slammed it onto the desk. She scrawled frantically with a pen. "Mr. Lau lived here. He worked until he died. He was never remembered, until now." The room stilled, the smoke froze mid-air. Mr. Lau's shadow leaned forward, eyes fixed on the words. His fingers hovered, trembling, as if touching the page through her hand. The typewriter gave one final clack, then fell silent. The cigarette ember in his hand glowed once, then dimmed to nothing. Alice gasped, lungs burning. The figure slowly dissolved, smoke unraveling back into the walls. For the first time, the desk was empty, the chair still, but in the silence, she heard his voice one last time, faint, almost tender. "Thank you." For the first time since she moved in, Alice slept without waking to typewriter keys or scraping chairs. The air was still, almost too still, and when morning light spilled through the curtains it felt sharp and clean. Like the room itself had been scrubbed. The faint smell of menthol smoke was gone. She looked at the desk with cautious hope. The surface was bare except for her notebook, the last page inked with the hurried scrawl she had written in desperation. "Mr. Lau lived here. He worked until he died. He was never remembered, until now." The ink had bled slightly, but the words were intact. She touched them as if sealing a promise. At work, her colleagues noticed she seemed lighter. "Finally getting sleep?" they teased. Alice only nodded, unwilling to share the truth. She told herself the haunting was over, that acknowledging Mr. Lau's story had freed him. But small reminders lingered. When she returned home one evening, she found a single sheet of blank paper on the desk. No impressions, no words, just blank, as though waiting. Another night, as she drifted toward sleep, she thought she heard a sigh, content this time, not weary. The room was quieter now, but Alice couldn't shake the sense that she was not entirely alone. She had ended the haunting, perhaps, but not the presence. The tenant had left, but part of him remained, watching with gratitude. And sometimes, when the city outside grew hushed and the neon hummed low, she swore she heard one last key strike, solitary and soft, as if someone were signing off at the end of a long, unfinished shift. Boarding rooms are meant to be temporary. Students come and go, workers drift through, the walls forget their names as quickly as they are written on mailboxes. But some tenants never check out. They leave pieces of themselves behind, unpaid hours, unfinished words, unspoken exhaustion, that seep into the plaster and linger in the silence. Mr. Lau was not a monster. He was a man consumed by routine, chained to deadlines until his heart stopped at the desk. What trapped him was not hatred but habit, the endless need to keep working, to meet expectations even after life had ended. His ghost was only the echo of every hour spent unseen, unremembered. That may be the cruelest kind of haunting, not by rage, but by routine. Rooms remember, desks remember, and if you move in where someone never truly left, you may inherit more than cheap rent. So if you ever find a place where the chair is always slightly pulled back, where papers wait though you never set them out, where the air smells faintly of smoke that no one has lit, be careful. You may not be alone. The last tenant may still be working, waiting for you to finish what they could not. And once you sit down at the desk, the question is no longer whether the room is haunted. The question is whether it will ever let you leave.